Okay, disclaimer, before we get into this, I know this is a very heated topic for some people. I don't know why people get so adamant about it. To me, my take on this and my goal here is not to disprove one thing and prove another. It's just more to ask questions that might make people think, and most importantly, to just uh, really dig into the issue at hand and what it could really mean. To me, I just want to know the truth. And the problem with this whole issue is that we don't have all the variables. This is the problem with some of the scientists out there, is that the world is flat forever until it's not, right? And then when you find out that the world is not flat, it's not necessarily round either. It's kind of egg-shaped. So you could see how as you get new variables, you get way more accurate information. And to me, I'm going to read an article here of the Out of Africa thing. Uh, where the belief is that modern man basically is about 250,000 years old, and all the different races of people that are there all came from one tribe in Africa, basically the Sun tribe, and basically everybody is, um, you know, a descendant of that. But there's a lot of things questions I'm going to bring up that kind of disprove that right away, and why they're going with that narrative. Everybody has an agenda and everybody has a theory, type of thing. But I'm just going to ask questions that might, kind of make you go, oh, but wait a minute. If this is fact and solid in concrete, I'll tell you what side of the fence I'm on. I used to be of the belief that, yeah, we came out of Africa, 40 to 60,000 years ago, until I looked into it. And again, I am not a geneticist. I'm just an average guy, your typical armchair blogger. Well, in my case, I'm sitting on my bed, but okay, I'm lazy, but I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable. But the thing is I'm not a scientist. Okay. I can't sit there and say that people that make these claims of 40 to 60,000 years ago, we came out of Africa and then migrated around the world, and then they came back to Africa. By the time they came back, there was a whole bunch of different types of people, Caucasians and Asians, and about 300 different spin-off, of races, so to speak, with the big three being Caucasian, Asian, and African. Now, I'm going to read you an article first, then I'm going to make some comments because there's just so much. I should probably really do this as a 2-video thing, but I'm not. I'm going to do it in one video because the fix here is the two issues I'm going to be mainly tackling is creation versus grand design. So versus evolution, that type of thing. And out of Africa, basically, all our bloodline come from Africa. And I'll tell you why I don't believe that anymore. But first, I will read this article. Now, again, take it with a grain of salt. Like anything, everybody says they're right, so somebody has to be wrong, right? Or is there just like hints of truth in everything you hear? And little column A, little column B, but everybody wants to have their sides. It's exactly this way. You have to understand that there's not only social engineering going on when you talk about this issue. Typically the people that there's only one race, the human race, which, okay, technically is correct because, we're all human. But on the other hand, we might not all necessarily be the same race. I believe we're about 300 different races, spinning off of the big races. But I think there's also a lot of, a lot of other evidence of why we have different races. And I don't think it's necessarily due to migration and evolution. And I'll explain as I go. And again, I'm just a simple man. But anyway, Russian geneticist disproves out of Africa theory. Out of Africa theory, or African replacement hypothesis, argues that every living human being descended from a small simian. Okay, that's okay. Simian group from Africa. The Afrocentric theory of single origin has been completely discredited by fossil record and recent genetic research. Yet it is still embraced and promoted by academia and the liberal media alike. The Out of Africa theory is financed by and endorsed by the United Nations. Right there is a big red flag for me. And is pushed globally in an effort to further the political agenda, not a scientific one. Recent fossil discoveries in Central Asia have already turned the out of Africa theory of human evolution upside down. Now, two Russian geneticists show that the DNA disproves the obsolete egalitarian theory. Their findings were published in Advance and Anthropology. The article can be clicked on. Click here. Okay. Oh, and I'm reading this article. The title of this article. There's a few people that have published it. It's called "Russian Geneticist Disproves Out of Africa Theory." So, and this was Sunday, May 11th, 2014, is when it was published, and I'm reading it off of Atlantean Guardians. So, or sorry, Atlantean Gardens. So take that again with whatever you want. You know, maybe some people say, well, that thing's been proven to be a fraud, but here's the critical data. Okay, the critical data point has emerged that disproves the out of Africa concept. Not one non-African participant out of the more than 400 individuals in the project tested positive for any of the 13 African subclads. Okay, I don't even really know what that means. I got an idea. I know enough to be dangerous, but I can't tell you. So you'll have to dive into that a bit more, again, to see if this is fact or fiction. Re-examining out of Africa theory and the origins of Europeoids, white people, in the light of the DNA genealogy, 7,556 haploids of the 46 subclads in the 17 major haploid groups were considered, and the finding that the Europeoid haplogroups did not descend from Africa haplogroups. A or B is supported by the fact that the bearers of the Caucasians, Europeoid haplogroups, as well as non-African haplogroups, do not carry either SNPS, M91, P97, M31, P82, M23, M114, P262, M32, M59, P89, P291, P102, M13, M171, M118, in quotations, haplogroup A and its subcategories S and Ps, or M60, M181, P90, haplogroup B. Okay. And it goes on from advanced theory or anthropology, from advances in anthropology, can't speak. 7,556 haplogroups of the 46 in the 17 major haplogroups were considered, or sorry, 46 subclads in the 17 major haplogroups were considered an item on their basis ancestral haplogroup and time spans to their common ancestors. For the purpose of design of the time-balanced haplogroup tree, it is found that African haplogroup A is very remote time-wise for all of the haplogroups which have the separated common ancestor. Okay. Now, when we get down to the common ancestor thing, it's pretty interesting what they talk about here. But anyway, the finding that the Europeoid haplogroups did not descend from Africa, African haplogroups A or B, is supported by the fact that the bearers of the Europeoid haplogroups, as well as the non-African haplogroups, do not carry either all those one, S and P right through. Okay. Now, as it was shown recently in the walkthrough YFTD NA project, the reference is incorporated therein on the several hundred people from the various haplogroups. It is socially accepted to attempt to explain the human anomalies that do not fit the prevailing out of Africa model, such as the origins of Rh negative blood type, okay, typically found in redheads, I think. Many indoctrination anthropologists, elect politicians, working celebrities, and other unqualified media news personalities unanimously insist that there is no such thing as race. The hostility and intolerance shown towards opposing theories backed by science evidence is truly ironic. World is flat, world is round. There's always been fighting. Everything is political nowadays because it's politically funded. There's no such thing as non-biased science. Unfortunately. It's kind of, some people don't like what you find, and that's the way it goes. But even with all this article that I'm reading, I'm not done the article yet, but just a footnote. I don't even need to read this article to know that the out of Africa theory from 40,000 to 60,000 years ago, which should be the big clue for most people, why it's not possible that we descended from people that you know that short time ago. But anyway, if I'll explain as I go. So keeping on with the what's going on here. Unfounded accusations of racism have become common as the prevailing Darwinian-inspired theory is consistently being challenged by the growing mountain of conflicting scientific evidence, especially involving the field of genetics. It is now scientifically irrefutable fact that the human species has been found to contain some substantial quantity of DNA, at least 20%, from other hominid populations, not classified as Homo sapiens, such as Neanderthals, Denisovans. That's the one I always forget about the Denisovans. I always call them the Denisovans, but they're Denisovans. That's the ones. Okay, just so you know, almost anybody of Caucasoid, ancestry basically has Neanderthal DNA, but Asians tend to have Denisovan DNA. So these are again other little ape men running around, typically not quite fully human yet. Basically, just a one-off cousin from humans. Neanderthals and Denisovans and stuff like that. African Arctic Homo erectus, and now possibly even Hobbit Homo, if I can say this, forensicis, I can't even say it. Little ape-like dude. Why do these scientists have to use all these big words? I'm just a simple man. Oh boy. Anyway, but the point is Africans don't share Neanderthal DNA. Caucasians and Europeans basically share something like 3 to 4% Neanderthal DNA. Right there tells you that we're different. Like 3 to 4% doesn't sound like a big number. And even minus that, there's still a 1% difference between the races. It doesn't sound like a big number, only 1%. But how big is a 1% difference? That's the thing. The point is, for me, the size of the difference doesn't matter. You cannot acknowledge it. The 3% is different. You cannot acknowledge the difference without admitting that we're different. And that's not a bad thing. This is the part I don't understand. Why people get so upset to say that we're slightly different from each other. I think that's unique. I think that's very, very cool. Yes, I do understand there's more genetic difference between males and females than there is between the races. But there is a difference. And only if we're honest with each other and we say, hey, look, it doesn't mean one side's better than the other or anything like that. What it means is we're different. And only from that brings you to another question, which where did we come from? This is the main question. Where did we come from? And it's going to get really deep into this. And again, I know right now there's some people that their blood's probably boiling, but that's okay. If you have an open mind, I'll finish the article and then I'll put my spin on it. And, you take out of it whatever you take out of it. I'm not here to try to brainwash you to think one thing or another. In fact, I just want you to think. That's all I want. Okay? And to me, I don't care what the answer is. I just want to know what it is. It's like, what's the answer to the $64 million question? You know what I mean? So we can get the $64 million, right? Yeah, but anyway. So anyway, if not given drugs to prevent infant death, okay, this is another chapter in the article here. If not given drugs to prevent infant death, the pregnant body of a Rhesus negative mother will attack, try to reject, and even kill her own offspring if it is by a Rhesus positive male. The domestic dog, Canine Lupus familiaris, is the subspecies of the gray wolf, Canine lupus, and they produce hybrids. Okay, so that little, I'll just read RHESUS, negative, whatever that is. So whatever that is, that's what they're talking about. Okay, now keep moving on. The numerous other examples of where two separate species, for example, the different number of chromosomes, can also produce viable offspring, yet considered separate species. That said, humanity has been shown to be, genetically speaking, hybrid species. I kind of have to agree with this. I can't go with the evolution theory of man again, going with the timeline, it won't fit, and you'll see what I mean as I go. So hybrid species that did not all share the same hunter-gatherer ancestry from Africa. Uh, Moving right along, getting close to the end here. Recent sequencing of ancient genomes suggests that interbreeding went on between numerous or several ancient human-like groups more than 30,000 years ago, uh, including as well as yet to and unknown human ancestors. So there's basically, if you think about 40,000 years ago, okay, we know for sure Neanderthals were still walking around. We know for sure that the ones I just said there, it eludes me anyway. The Desovians, they were walking around, and they've only discovered the Desovians in 2010. Okay, and it seems like every other week, month, or year, we're discovering a new subspecies of human, and there's an awful lot of stuff around northern Russia and stuff like that that's starting to come to light. I think they're going to find stuff under the permafrost that's going to blow our mind. Probably within Canada and United States, like up in the Alaska region, because whenever they do what you call it, basically, getting the bitumen out of the sand. Basically, what they do is they have a big fire hose, okay, to get the oil out of the sands in the Arctic. What they do is they take this hose, it's hot water, and they just basically blast a snowbank. And as the snowbank goes, they'll do this for several reasons. Number one, in the Arctic, there's permafrost all year round. It takes even where the snow goes, the permafrost stays about 6 feet under the ground, and it just stays there. It never thaws out. So they use these hoses to basically hot water to thaw out the ground so that they can work the ground and with heavy equipment. And in that process, they find all kinds of fossils and everything. And that's how they figured out that, for example, woolly mammoths, there was some sort of flash freeze event that probably killed off the woolly mammoth as recent as 10,000 years ago. And they figured out that's what it was. Is basically the woolly mammoths, there was a bit of a flood, and then it froze, and they basically froze in place. And then, of course, when you thaw these guys out, they're perfectly preserved, and they can't figure out, it was almost like they just died in place, and they actually literally did. And that's how they figured stuff like that. So I'm thinking it's just a matter of time before we find different species of humans and stuff like that in those kind of regions of the world. But anyway, getting back to it. So including as yet to known ancestors, hominid population, says Mark Thompson, evolutionary geneticist at University of College London. Okay, so there's a lot of little guys that were running around we still don't know yet, but we have their coding in our DNA. But even that's not what's convinced me the out of Africa theory doesn't work. Recent genetic studies are toting shocking headlines about ancient humans rapidly interbreeding and indulging in interspecies, interracial sex with multiple mystery sub-races in the Lord of the Rings style world of a different creatures, including mystery DNA, neither human nor Neanderthal yet. Not yet identified, so we don't know what we're mixed with at that point. After World War II, Aryan utopia and the thorough paradise was complete, abolished, replaced by egalitarian utopia. You have to understand, both points of view are extreme, right? Promoting mythical sub-Saharan cradle of civilization, promoting globally with the funding by the UN and out of Africa hypothesis backed by the United Nations, with university adopting oftentimes enthusiastically celebrated as treated as a religious dogma in the universities that currently enjoy public federal or state funding taxpayers status. Okay, I'm just going to keep going here. No, that's it. That's pretty much the end of the article. Okay, so with all that, maybe you're looking at this and saying, I still don't believe this. This is not correct because. Okay, I'm just going to pose you some questions and then just think about it logically. This is why I believe, even after reading that, I think that just kind of backs up some of what I'm thinking. And again, my take on this isn't to find the pure race or whatever. This race is better than that race. To me, I don't care about that. What I'm saying is just we have not had enough time to be where we are now with that theory. Let's look at it like this. Forget about DNA testing. Forget about all that. We're just going to go with what they say the facts are. They say We migrated out of Africa between 40 and 60,000 years ago. Now we're going to push this number to 60,000, just to be as far back as we can get. So that means we went from the southern edge of Africa, moved all the way through the coastline through to Asia, somehow got down to Australia, came back up, went up into like northern Russia, came all the way across to Europe, and then back to Africa again. Something along, and several groups splitting off here, there along the way. And then evolution took over because the people who moved to the cold climates were basically evolved to be fair-skinned, light-haired, that type of thing. Caucasians, people that stayed in the east became more Asian looking, and then of course the people that went back to Africa stayed as dark as possible. You get the idea. So we have our three major groups and all these sub-spin-offs. Okay, now this is supposed to have happened within a 60,000 year span. It's impossible. It is impossible. How fast does evolution work? Not very. Here's the problem. They've discovered in like Morocco a non-African type people. Okay, they're African descent, but they are not African. They are clearly not African. They're a different type of person. They don't look African. They're fair skinned. But the problem is they discovered these people 130,000 years ago. Strike one. That means these people evolved before the out of Africa theory. So that's strike one. Now, the problem is our DNA probably split somewhere between the three major groups, from what I understand, between 120 to 140,000 years ago. So even at that, that means we had to come from somewhere else. Maybe it was Africa, but it didn't happen. It didn't happen on that timeline. It had to happen before the people made it to Morocco and started to change. Okay? Because if we even look at it like that, it means it took only, 100,000 years for a people to completely change from one, being dark black, tall Africans to lighter, more beige Moroccan. So it means that people, but that the problem is that the cart's before the horse here. Now let's go to strike two. In Israel, 95,000 years ago, again, getting closer to the timeline, but we're still 35,000 years off the mark. We find non-African looking people again. 80,000 years ago, strike three. In China, we find evidence of the first Asians. Asian looking people. So again, this is not possible because we weren't there yet. You see what I mean? So the out of Africa theory is, some people call it Afrocentric or whatever, politically correct or whatever. I'm like, okay, I look at it and I say, I don't care what the agenda is. I just know that that's not possible. And there's another problem. Environmental reasons, I believe, yes, people probably mutated into their environments. I don't see us evolving into the environments. I see us mutating. Yes, there is tons of evidence of albino Africans, basically, and you'll see them even still today. And unfortunately, the poor buggers, when they are born, they pretty much have to run and hide, because in Africa, in some cultures in Africa, if you see an albino, you're going to pretty much get eaten. They consider you like a unicorn or something like that, and they basically, some of the tribes will actually eat albinos. They'll kidnap them. They do all horrible things. But when you look at these albinos from Africa, they are not white people. They are albino black people. Yes, their hair may be almost whitish, blondish. Their eyes will, albinos have kind of more of a pinkish eye, but some of them will have like light blue eyes, but mostly a pinkish eye because, it's a defect, right? But Europeans are not albinos. They're not even close to albinos. They might have some traits that are albino, but they're not albinos. Albinos are extremely light sensitive, hard on the eyes. They have all kinds of problems that the average Caucasian doesn't have problems with. Yes, there are probably some things that are similar, but when you look at an African that is an albino, their features are still their skull feature is still African. Their body type is still African. They're not Caucasoids. They're Africans. So that is clearly a mutation. Or whatever it is, disease, mutation, whatever you want to consider it as, whatever the proper term is. But the point is albinos they're not these people. They're not a different race of people. because they're still going to be genetically and internally they're going to be the same as the people that they're around. There's, their DNA is going to start to split off. Okay, so that's one thing. So for if you're trying to go with the out of Africa theory, that means we had to evolve, turn from dark complexion to light complexion in only 60,000 years. Is that really enough time for this to happen? No. Now, there's some people out there that believe it only takes 16 generations for an African to lose their pigment if they're in, low light conditions type of thing, northern climate, that type of thing. But here's the problem. We have Inuit. Okay, the Inuit still have dark hair. Most of them, they're not super, super dark, but they're beige. They're more beige. The problem is these people live in the same climate as the most northern Europeans. But yet you have two completely, distinctly different groups of people. You have dark eyes, dark hair, short body type, plump, very well adapted to that environment. But the problem is when you go over to the Europeans, they're tall. Some of them are husky, but they're fair-skinned. They're typically Europeans are larger than. Let's say we'll take people from like. Iceland or someplace like that. They're typically taller than the average Eskimo. Now, diet does probably play a lot to do with that, sure. But if you look at people that lived in Iceland and people that lived in northern Canada, up in the North Pole type of thing, guess what? They've been living there roughly about the same time, but yet you have two people that didn't turn into Caucasoids. They didn't. Their skull shapes are still different. They didn't adapt to the environment exactly the same way the Europeans did. So did they adapt or did they mutate? This is a very fair question, and I think that's what science can't answer yet, because it doesn't make sense. Okay, now you could probably say, yeah, but the European side has the Neanderthal DNA. Well, that makes sense why they might look a little different in, say, like northern Iceland or northern Greenland or someplace like that than they would. Now, don't get me wrong, there's Eskimos in Greenland too. We also call them Inuit. I don't use political correct terms, but Inuit would be the political correct term for the most part. They have their branch Eskimos. The Russians have theirs, and they found 12,000 years ago that there was a group of Inuit or Eskimos, or whatever you want to refer to them as, in Russia that may have actually came over maybe as early, not 12,000 years, but 18,000 years ago. Okay, so we know that with the recent discovery in Russia, that there's a good chance that those people that are in northern Canada now migrated directly over the North Pole somehow to where they are today from Russia. Okay, so that puts them back about 18,000 years. Okay, so that's almost that's a third to half of the out of Africa theory. Okay, now in that time, okay, which is, like I say, a third to half the time, these people still look the same now as they did back then. This is a major problem, because if we're going with the evolution theory, these people should be blonde hair, blue-eyed, pale skin, but they're not. Okay, and now even if you're talking about the Chinese that came over the land bridge on the more western side of the country, over the land bridge through Alaska and stuff like that, and the Inuit that are up in that side of the country, even that doesn't work, because that goes back at least 12,000 years. Okay, so that puts us at roughly a quarter to a little bit less than a quarter to a fifth. So within that timeline, the people that you'd find remains of that old, guess what? Those people haven't changed in that amount of time. So if you're trying to say that people went from complete dark Africans to Asians to Caucasians within a 60,000 year span, it's almost impossible. It can't happen that fast, because if we would see that, in people, even in Asia, for example, we'd see people in Asia 80,000 years ago look like Asians today. They look, there's fossils that, or mummies that basically look like they do now. So there's a problem with that, because they're not supposed to look like that. They're supposed to have more African features. Now, there are some, people out there that you could sort of see where they started to do a bit of a transition. between African and Asian and whatever, but not very much. It's almost you almost find different hominids all over the place. Okay, like your Neanderthals and little them guys, the D dudes. Okay, the D dudes. I don't know why I have such a hard time with those guys, but anyway, they're just difficult. But we just discovered those guys in 2010. Okay, now in where was it? Not Bosnia. They found a very old human ancestor that goes back about 200 some odd thousand years, and it's just when we're starting to become, we're starting to get bigger feet. Our arms are still fairly long, but we're more hairless and stuff like that. Those type of hominids, I don't really consider humans yet. Like I'm talking full, modern man looking, walking upright, exactly the way we are now. And that's, again, they could trace this back to Africa about 250,000 years ago or 240,000 years ago for certain tribes. But the problem, again, it still runs out is that if they didn't leave up until 60,000 years ago, that means that gene pool was untouched for that amount of time. Some did go north, some did go east, but it still doesn't really, the migration pattern doesn't work with the out of Africa theory because they followed the coastline mostly. Some went north, but most of them didn't go very far north. And they didn't go far enough north to be, Europeans were the last to arrive to their destination, right? Because basically they did a big, again, they went from Africa up through moving eastwards through Asia. And when they got to Asia, somehow they made it down to Australia, which that doesn't make sense either. I don't care what kind of travel they would have had at the time. You would have to be able to, even from Papua New Guinea to Australia, okay, to be able to get a vessel to get people from one area to the other. There's only a couple of ways this could have happened. A, there had to be a huge southern polar cap. That there had to be an ice sheet. Now, maybe there was, maybe there wasn't. I don't know. But how did people in Australia end up where they are? The Aborigines, they're older than 60,000 years old. They've been there for a long time. It's out of Africa doesn't work. Something's wrong here. Now, some people might have a theory that the reason why people are where they are and where and everything like that, that it was before the continents actually broke up. I don't know if I believe that one or not because of the type of atmosphere at the time, but it's possible. It's possible. Now I'm going to throw the other stuff in there, like the God gene and stuff like that they talk about. So did we evolve? Did we mutate? Or was there a grand design? Again, I'm not a religious person by any stretch of the imagination, but I notice there's a theme from one religion to the next, and there's a lot of similarities. I'm just going to pick a few. The Muslims have a way that the earth was created, and it's not identical to the way the Christians, like the book of Genesis or anything, but there's similarities. The fire and ice type of thing. Then the Vikings have their tree of life, which to me, I think the tree of life represents the sun. And then they have 9 worlds in this tree, and we have 9 planets in the solar system. Maybe that's just coincidence, but who knows? So the representation is, it seems like all these religions around the world basically talk about the same event that happened, but it happened in a different, each one had a different metaphor of how it happened, but they all seem to be describing the same event. Okay, now with that said, you have the Hindus, okay, that really with their flying Vimanas. I mean, this gets into the alien, ancient aliens type of theory, but maybe there's something to it. Remember, we don't have all the pieces, not even close. I mean, look, I think there's going to be links of people that we're going to discover that will show exactly how all the different races came to be. I think there may be different types of Neanderthals or whatever, and there was probably all this crossbreeding, like they said, because there's a lot of our DNA, again, we don't know where it came from, we don't know what it is. Maybe it has nothing to do with humans whatsoever. Maybe it's, who knows? So maybe we're part of many different things, which would make us, and each time you find a different hominid or whatever that we've mixed with, adds that much more difference between each person. So if you, let's say the African DNA is the first human DNA. It seems to be the oldest so far with everything they know. But let's say it's not mixed with absolutely anything else. It's a pure DNA. It is its own species. It's 100% its own species, and that's it. We're going to go with that theory just for now. Maybe it's not true, but we're just going to say that. So that means, let's say we're going to go with Asians. Let's say they're 2 to 4% Decivovians, the D dudes, okay? And we know that, basically all Europeans have Neanderthal DNA, 3 to 4%. So we know right off the bat we're starting with a 3 to 4% difference between each one of these three races. Now let's say they find another hominid that it only mixed with one of the two. We'll say it mixed with the Caucasians, and that's another 2 or 3%. And then we find another one, only this time it's the Asians, and it's maybe 15% of their DNA. You know what I mean? Like, or 2% or whatever it can be, And then we find 8 different hominids that we're all mixed with. And, 6 go to one side and 2 go to the other. And next thing you know, well, there's no way you could call this person this exact same race as the other two groups. I mean, you wouldn't be able to do it because there's just too many different, mixed. They're hybrids. They become, because each time you add in one of those hybrids, you're making us less alike. Now, that's my theory on it, and I think that's probably what we're going to discover in the future. Why? Because again, we don't have all the puzzles, but that makes sense because there were so many different types of hominids that were walking around 250,000 years ago, including humans. I mean, you have to understand our whole species of human, all the hominids, is about 7 million years old that we know of. Okay. Now, when you look at the Bibles and stuff like that, there was, a lot of people, some people think of the young Earth theory of that the Earth is only 6,000 years old. I don't necessarily believe that at all. I can't. I'm not offended by anybody who does. That's up to you. But I'm also, to me, it just can't be done. It can't be done. But on the other hand, I look at it when I hear the passage that there was giants in those days. Now, the term giant could be, it's relative to one's size. Now, if we look at the early hominids, they're all pretty short, okay? So maybe the first real humans, species race unknown, were actually probably extremely short. Maybe they were only 3.5 feet tall or something like this, but we haven't discovered them yet. But maybe they were the actual first modern man, and we just don't know about them. Maybe they were a lot more intelligent than what we are now. And maybe these were the people that kind of started passing down stories and stuff like that and what have you. And then these newer, bigger hominids come that are about 6 feet tall. Well, if you're 3.5 feet tall and you're looking at somebody that's 6 feet tall, they're a giant. You know what I mean? So maybe that's what they're talking about. Who knows? Now, man walking with dinosaurs, here's the thing. Some people, well, I don't believe that because dinosaurs died 6,500 million years ago. That's, most likely true, but they have found islands where they've found pygmy dinosaur fossils and woolly mammoth fossils and stuff like that. And the thing is these animals died later. And they found these in the South Pacific somewhere. It was either off of the Philippines or someplace. I believe it was off the Philippines. They also found very small fossils of people, like really tiny people, and they were full adults because of their island was so small, and it just the way they adapted to that island, everything became pygmy. It was kind of neat, and that was a few years ago. So it's not impossible to me to say that, okay, well, did man walk with dinosaurs? Well, I think everything is, again, until we find conclusive evidence that it did, they did, we don't know. That's the only thing we say. Now, because we haven't found the smoking gun, so to speak, I've seen the footprints thing, and I think they might most likely be a hoax. I've seen the hammer in the in fossilized hammer and stuff like that. I don't believe that one. It's a hoax somehow. I don't know exactly how it's a hoax, but I'm pretty sure it's a hoax. The more I looked at it, the more I was like, okay, well, yeah. And then some of the stuff has actually been admitted as a hoax, like the sandal footprints and stuff like that. So, it is what it is. So, you got to watch out, too, for some of the stuff that you do come across. But there's still another problem, is that Again, we're looking at 12,000-year-old structures in ancient Iraq, so to speak, that they dig up and they find these incredibly intricately put together. I mean, even by today's standards, these are stone structures that are like jigsaw puzzles. And they don't, they're not just blocks. These things are like curved, they're stylish, and there's these pillars with animal carvings on it. And on one animal carving, it's very clear it can't be mistaken for anything else but a stegosaurus. Basically a dinosaur that should have been extinct for millions of years. How would 12,000-year-old technology or civilization know what a stegosaurus looked like? To be able to carve one out. How would they know? Could one have survived? It's possible. Anything's possible. Not everything that dies gets fossilized. I mean, there's a lot of things that could probably die, and you know, nature just it rots or whatever. That's why we don't find as many fossils and stuff here in Canada. Is because the weather, everything just rots. We have, you find all the fossils in the dry areas mostly, or the frozen areas, or mud bogs, tar bogs and stuff like that. You don't find it in the areas with a lot of precipitation quite as much, because everything rots, and then when it rots, it just breaks into dust or whatever. Now, some of the fossils you'll find, like say in caves in Spain and stuff like that. Uh, you know, some stuff does get preserved, but in most of the time, I mean, even here in Canada, it's like native remains. The oldest one I think they found was like 3,600 years old or something like that. That was still preserved. Somehow it was in a cave that it actually preserved. It was low oxygen, and it was an anomaly. But most of the time, those type of burial sites would have just rotted away. So it is kind of a very unique type of thing to find stuff like that. And I think as we find stuff like that, we'll get closer to an answer of how it basically, why things are the way they are. Now, the reason why I bring up the Bible stuff is because I think most of the Bibles were meant to be used together. It was just people taking different accounting of the same things from the same kind of region of the world. But on the other hand, they were doing it from a point of view, their own point of view. So that's why you got the different religions. But when we look at, for example, the Hindus with their flying vimanas and stuff like that, they make a connection very, very much like rockets and stuff like that, that somebody traveled here and brought this to us and brought that to us. And then if you look at the Old Testament, well, Jesus came from another planet, and which they call heaven, and he basically, well, maybe not heaven, but wherever he came from. uh and it sounds an awful lot like, if you've ever seen the movie Prometheus, I'm thinking that's probably an awful lot. And just hear me out on this. The reason why I think that's so possible is because, look, we've made a sheep named Dolly. Okay, we have the technology to clone humans. It's just the ethics, of doing it is what keeps people. And I'm sure we've probably done it behind closed doors. How successful? Who knows? But there's a thing in nature that a lot of people don't realize, is there's a mathematical design in nature that is not found anywhere else. And I think the number is 2641, or I can't remember what it is. But anyway, it's a proportionate thing. You'll see it on the human face. You'll see it on a leaf. You'll see it everywhere. But everything has a proportion to it. It's found everywhere. And it's kind of a weird, I can't remember the name of the number. Designers use it to design cars and stuff like that. I can't remember that. I think 4613 or something like that, or was it 2618? I can't remember. It was a number, something like that. But this was a constant that just, it was a design. It's like everything has been designed. The entire universe has been designed, and no matter where you look, this number will show up. And anything, it doesn't matter what it is, it shows up in nature. And it's basically the way proportions of everything, head, body, eyes, nose, all that. It's a proportion, and it's even on everything. It's the same everywhere. So it's clearly showing a design. Now, the Earth being 6,500 million years old, or 6,500 billion years old, or 65 billion years old, sorry, is probably too young to actually be sustaining life as quickly as we came along. there had to be, and I caught this off the Tolley show uh, last night from the making of this video. This is what kind of inspired me to make this video. But anyway, there's a guy. I'll see if I can put his name down on the link. But basically, he was a scientist turned a believer into the, like basically turned religious. Now the thing is there had to be 180 conditions that were perfect for us to have the Earth come along and be where it is. The Moon has 150 conditions that has to be perfect for a gravitational pull. If it's too fast, too slow. Now you have to understand the Earth is slowing down. When the Earth was first formed, right after the big, the Moon smacked into the Earth and turned it into, a big hot molten lava. We had like 4-hour days. Now they're 24 hours. So another 65 million years from now, we'll probably have like a 30-hour, 40-hour day. Who knows? Because the rotation is slowing down. Now, there was other things way beyond I could, explain. You'll have to, I'll see if I can find a link to the guy's website. You can go to it and just let your mind soak up whatever's there and make, draw your own conclusion and stuff. But he did talk about two things that I'll just leave you with, kind of, is that it seems like to me, and I agree with this, it seems like we just showed up. People just showed up in pockets. I believe we are 300 different types of races. But the fact that we showed up as soon as we did, life beginning on this planet about 300 million years ago to now, or 380 million years ago, I think it was, to now, we did, the scientists are saying that we didn't have enough time to evolve as quickly as we have. So maybe that's true, maybe that's not, I don't know. But they said for everything to be as perfectly designed as it is, it's to the power of, basically it's the 97th to the power of something like 100 million. So it's like 100 million, 97 times 100 million. It's an unfathomable number of how precise everything had to be for us to have life right now. In other words, it sounds more like a design than evolution. So that's the argument that they're making, which, I don't know, you take it to wherever you... I'm probably not explaining it right, but I do believe that the out of Africa theory, again, we've just been finding way too much. The problem I have with some of these hardcore scientists and stuff like that is they work their entire lives on one theory or hypothesis or whatever, and they don't like to be told that no, it's not correct, because their whole life works based on that. So they'll go tooth and nail to tell you that the world is flat. But the problem is true science is non-biased, and it's not good, it's not bad, it just is. And what that means is, as we find new evidence, the story is going to change. It's not going to stay the same. The thing I don't get is why people get so offended when the story changes. To me, it does completely. Like, again, maybe we are from out of Africa, but I just don't believe it happened 60,000 years ago. We didn't have enough time. We just don't have enough time to evolve into what everybody's evolved into. I think we interbred with other hominids and mutated. That makes more sense. Even adapting to the environment. Again, natives and Inuit and Vikings don't look the same. You know what I'm saying? They just don't look the same, and they lived on the same kind of climates at the same amount of time with roughly the same type of diet. I mean, both are eating caribou. They eat caribou in Greenland. They eat caribou in Iqaluit. You know what I mean? Like, and up in near Alert, that's what they eat is caribou. Okay, they eat seals. They have the same diet, but yet these people don't look the same. So you can't call them the same. So to me, I'm not offended by the idea that there is more than one race out there. I'm not offended. No, I get the politically correct thing. There's only one race, the human race. I understand that everybody should treat each other equally good like that. But I'm also, referring to that movie Prometheus. Lately, I've been bringing up a lot of movies in my videos. I don't know why, but anyway. But it's just the concept of it makes so much sense to me that I'm not saying I believe in life was created solely by aliens or anything like that. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying there does seem to be a design to it. Now, one last argument that this guy on the Josh Tolley show was making was that it couldn't have been aliens that bred with us or anything like that, because of the amount of distance of the universe. It would have taken 130,000 or 130,000 million years to get here or whatever. 130 billion years to get here. It would have still, we're still, we're about a third too quick for that to have happened. So anyway, meaning the meaning the boat wouldn't have arrived yet. So just the way they explain it, I'm probably not explaining it very well. But anyway, I guess I'm gonna just leave it at that. To me, it's an interesting discussion. I think it's something that, yeah, there's a lot of agendas on all sides. I acknowledge that, but I think there's way more to the story than any of us could ever even imagine. And I think as new discoveries come along, and there are seems to be discoveries every other week, so to speak, I think we're going to find amazing things off the coast. Uh, you know, Probably a couple of hundred miles off the coastal waters. I think the secret to humanity is because again, all animals live near the water. People were no different, and I think under the ocean, near on the coastlines, that's where we're going to find the origins of man. That just a hunch, because a lot of that stuff is covered with water now. So, and we do find civilizations out there from time to time. So anyway, I'm gonna leave it at that. So you guys tell me what you think, and there you go. G'day, hi, and welcome. Okay, disclaimer, before we get into this, I know this is a very heated topic for some people. I don't know why people get so adamant about it. To me, my take on this and my goal here is not to disprove one thing and prove another. It's just more to ask questions that might make people think, and most importantly, to just uh, really dig into the issue at hand and what it could really mean. To me, I just want to know the truth. And the problem with this whole issue is that we don't have all the variables. This is the problem with some of the scientists out there, is that the world is flat forever until it's not, right? And then when you find out that the world is not flat, it's not necessarily round either. It's kind of egg shaped. So you could see how as you get new variables, you get way more accurate information. And to me, the I'm going to read an article here of the Out of Africa thing. Uh, where the belief is that modern man basically is about 250,000 years old, and all the different races of people uh, that are there all came from one tribe in Africa, basically the Sun tribe, and basically everybody is, um, you know, a descendant of that. But there's a lot of things that questions I'm going to bring up that are kind of disprove that right away, and why they're going with that narrative. Everybody has an agenda and everybody has a theory type of thing. But I'm just going to ask questions that might, kind of make you go, oh, but wait a minute. If this is fact and solid in concrete, I'll tell you what side of the fence I'm on. I used to be of the belief that, yeah, we came out of Africa, 40 to 60,000 years ago, until I looked into it. And again, I am not a geneticist. I'm just an average guy, your typical armchair blogger. Well, in my case, I'm sitting on my bed, but okay, I'm lazy, but I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable. But the thing is I'm not a scientist. Okay. I can't sit there and say that people that make these claims of 40 to 60,000 years ago, we came out of Africa and then migrated around the world, and then they came back to Africa. By the time they came back, there was a whole bunch of different types of people, Caucasians and Asians, and about 300 different spin-off, of races, so to speak, with the big three being Caucasian, Asian, and African. Now, I'm going to read you an article first, then I'm going to make some comments because there's just so much. I should probably really do this as a two-video thing, but I'm not. I'm going to do it in one video because the things here is the two issues I'm going to be mainly tackling is creation versus grand design, so versus evolution, that type of thing, and out of Africa, basically, all our bloodline come from Africa. And I'll tell you why I don't believe that anymore. But first, I will read this article. Now, again, take it with a grain of salt. Like anything, everybody says they're right, so somebody has to be wrong, right? Or is there just like hints of truth in everything you hear? And little column A, little column B, but everybody wants to have their side. Say, no, it's exactly this way. You have to understand that there's not only social engineering going on when you talk about this issue. You know, typically the people that there's only one race, the human race, which okay, technically is correct because you know we're all human. You know, but on the other hand, might not all necessarily be the same race. I believe we're about 300 different races, spinning off of the big races. But I think there's also a lot of you know, a lot of other evidence of you know, why we have different races, and I don't think it's necessarily due to migration and evolution. Um, and I'll explain as I go. And again, I'm just a simple man. But anyway, Russian geneticist disproves out of Africa theory. Out of Africa theory, or African replacement hypothesis, argues that every living human being in descended from a small simian. Okay, that's okay. Simian group from Africa. The Afrocentric theory of single origin has been completely discredited by fossil record and recent genetic research. Yet it is still embraced and promoted by academia and the liberal media alike. The out of Africa theory is financed by and endorsed by the United Nations. Right there is a big red flag for me. And is pushed globally in an effort to further the political agenda, not a scientific one. Recent fossil discoveries in Central Asia have already turned the out of Africa theory of human evolution upside down. Now, two Russian geneticists showed that the DNA disproves the obsolete egalitarian theory. Their findings were published in Advance and Anthropology. The article can be clicked on. Click here. Okay. Oh, and I'm reading this article. The title of this article, there's a few people that have published it. It's called Russian Geneticist Disproves Out of Africa Theory. So, and this was Sunday, May 11th, 2014 is when it was published. And I'm reading it off of Atlantean Guardians. So, or sorry, Atlantean Gardens. So take that again with whatever you want. You know, maybe some people say, well, that thing's been proven to be a fraud, but here's the critical data. Okay, the critical data point has emerged that disproves the out of Africa concept. Not one non-African participant out of the more than 400 individuals in the project tested positive for any of the 13 African subclads. Okay, I don't even really know what that means. I got an idea. I know enough to be dangerous, but I can't tell you. So you'll have to dive into that a bit more, again, to see if this is fact or fiction. Re-examining out of Africa theory and the origins of Europeoids, white people, in the light of the DNA genealogy, 7,556 haploids of the 46 subclads in the 17 major haploid groups were considered, and the finding that the Europeoid haplogroups did not descend from Africa haplogroups. A or B is supported by the fact that the bearers of the Caucasians, Europeoid haplogroups, as well as non-African haplogroups, do not carry either SNPS, M91, P97, M31, P82, M23, M114, P262, M32, M59, P89, P291, P102, M13, M171, M118, in quotations, haplogroup A and its subcategories S and Ps, or M60, M181, P90, haplogroup B. Okay.